Hey everybody, this is Chris.
I'm Jeremy.
And this is another episode of Taking Every Thought Captive. With that in mind, let's go ahead and go to the scriptures. My brain's not working.
All right, we're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 6, probably 1 through 9. Let's see what happens here. Now this is the commandment, the statutes, and the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over, to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son and your son's son, by keeping all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you, all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
Amen. The word of the Lord. And as we go over that text, that is the hallmark text for Christian education. Christian education should first and foremost in every way be in the home. Mom and dad raising up godly children. And I pulled up a couple other verses as well. Ephesians chapter 6:4,
which I'm assuming Paul pulls from Deuteronomy.
Yep, absolutely. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. It parallels exactly with Proverbs chapter 4, Proverbs chapter 5, and honestly much of Proverbs.
All of Proverbs.
And so they're just the wisdom that we have. And so where do we get this from? What is wise, what is good for us is, well, God's law outlines a whole lot of that. Some of that doesn't apply to us in the same way today, being under the new covenant. But anything that applies to faith and morals would still apply today. And so we look to those things as well. One of the reasons we are doing this video today is there is a new law, has not been passed. I don't think it's been passed anywhere yet, not even in the House. Just proposed in the state of Illinois. But the reality is this is the kind of law that's been passed places before. You'll see laws like this in Canada, in Europe. California, I think, already pretty much has this. And it's going to become more widespread. It's just a question of how long does it take. So I would encourage every Christian parent, be mindful of what this says. Think about the fact that this is what the legislature in Illinois wants to have happen. They, in their own report, say that it is what they say even most parents want this. It's how they phrased it. And so we have to know that this is coming down the pipeline. This is an encouragement to you to be teaching your children. This isn't, no Christian can go to public school. This is teach your children so that if they do hear things that are not true, they know how to respond to that. So let's go ahead and we'll pull this up. And I got this straight out of the Illinois General Assembly. So it's, this is exactly what is on the docket. You will notice certain words crossed out here and there. This is as they're amending it and looking at it, they will make changes. So maybe some of the stuff that we look at today will be amended later on, but this is its current iteration anyways, as of I believe October, or no, when was it? They have a date in here about the most recent changes, but maybe we'll find that. So this starts off, and it doesn't sound bad, right? Policies addressing sexual abuse. Is that something that kids maybe need to be informed on? Yes, by their parents. Right. But the reality is a lot of parents don't teach their kids on this, and a lot of kids are abused because of that. So it's a policy addressing sexual abuse of children that may include, or shall, they changed it, shall include age-appropriate curriculum for students in pre-K through 12th grade. So hear that. Pre-K through 12th grade. Training for school personnel on child sexual abuse, educational information to parents or guardians provided in the school handbook on the warning signs of a child being abused, along with any needed assistance, referral or resource information, available counseling, and resources for students affected by sexual abuse. None of that seems bad by any means. But as we keep going, we are going to find some other stuff in here as well. So let's go ahead, and I'm trying to look at my own notes on the report as well. So somewhere around number 3 in this section.
Right there.
Yeah. So parents, the general public, and young people overwhelmingly support comprehensive sex education. So sex education for all grades. Now, they will keep saying age appropriate. Age appropriate means, in terms of we wouldn't share everything with a kindergartner that we would share with a high schooler, but there are going to be some similarities between them that we as Christians fundamentally disagree with in light of God's teaching on sexuality and gender. So students often lack the education to prevent pregnancy, HIV, other sexually transmitted infections, to develop healthy relationships, plan personal safety, develop decision-making skills. I don't think any of us would necessarily disagree with that. And then if we get down to the next section, it delves into that age and developmentally appropriate. It means suitable for a particular age or group of children and adolescents based on the cognitive, emotional, and behavioral development typical of that age or age group. So basically, whatever modern psychiatry says, that's how to interpret that, because that's how they're going to get their information. And then they get to consent. This is a key word in the document. Consent means knowing, affirmative, conscious, and voluntary agreement to engage in a specific interpersonal, physical, or sexual activity at a given time. So they're going to be talking about consent to K through 12th grade. Now, mind you, it's going to be presented differently, but that is part of the goal on this. Now, they're also going to talk about culturally appropriate, and there's a lot here. I'll let you read some of this, but something to at least catch your eye is right here. Communities of, people of diverse sexual orientation, gender identities, gender expressions, people who are intersex, and then it goes into some other categories that I wouldn't have any problem with. But right here, sexual orientations. So you have lesbian, gay, bi, poly, whatever. There's plenty out there. You can go look up the alphabet of immorality if you want to. And then gender identities. So male, female.
Zim, Zer.
Yes. I'm trying to think, because that non-binary, non-person, I think, is even one. They don't identify as person. So, yeah, these are things that are contrary to God's law. Jesus said that in the beginning, God created them male and female. We understand that because of the fall, there are going to be mutations. There are going to be flaws that create genetic components that are hard to tell. Sometimes even the biology may be hard to tell sometimes because of the fall. There's disabilities in every area of human experience.
Yeah, and somebody might ask, what do you do in those cases? Well, I look to the Ethiopian eunuch, even though he may or may not have had that mutation or whatever. He may have been from birth a eunuch. We don't know. Mm-hmm. But what was the whole point of that? He saw Jesus and he lived for Jesus. So if you do have something like that, there's nothing stopping you from coming to Christ.
Yeah.
Except for your own sin.
Yeah. Which we all have.
Yeah.
Even the scriptures speak about those who were born eunuchs. Mm-hmm. And so there's that category. The scriptures realize there are going to be situations where, sexuality is malformed. We are to be patient, kind, loving, compassionate, and as with all people, we lead them to Christ.
Yeah.
But this is not the same as this. These are open rebellion against God's word, and that's the fundamental difference. We don't have a problem with a whole lot of this document, but there are certain things that we would absolutely reject because of the consistency of God's teaching on them. So I want to get down into specifics of what they actually teach the kids, and so there's going to be some variety, but they do get into some of it for each age group. Notice there is going to be talk of sexting and what that entails. What you should be mindful of, Christian parent, is that means this is happening. If they feel they need to teach this to kids of these age groups, that's because kids of these age groups have encountered it or experienced it either consensually or not consensually, and at least part of this would be in regards to that, not consensually. Do notice that this is supposed to begin no later than July 1st of 2021, which really turns into the fall semester of 2021. This is what they expect to have happen, and so here's a list of things that, like I said, we may not disagree with, but some of it we will. Again, same time frame, but it cannot. This is things that cannot be taught, because some of this is going to come from the school itself, but the documents also say you can bring in outside instructors as soon as I can learn how to talk. But here's what they can't do. They cannot use shame-based or stigmatizing language. So right there, if you say homosexuality is a sin, that's stigmatizing language. So no Christian perspective, in fact, many religious perspectives, cannot be brought to bear on that issue. Sorry, go ahead.
The other part, one of the parts in there, I don't know if you're going to talk about it in that part, is stigmatized parenting. Quite frankly, this whole thing is stigmatizing parenting.
Right.
And granted, parents, not all parents are created equal. Not all parents are good. My wife works with parents all the time who are from the ranging, helicopter parents to not parents at all. And so I get that. But for us as Christians, this is stigmatizing our parenting. This is saying, parents, you don't know how to educate your children, so we're going to take them and we're going to educate them in the ways of the world, so that they have a better knowledge, quote unquote, of what is going on sexually. And it's like, you guys need to realize that this is taking the parents out of it. And I get it. I mean, I really do, because, like I said, not all parents are parenting their children, and so I get why schools think that this is their responsibility.
Yeah.
If somebody's going to teach them, why not us? Well, the problem is you're not teaching correct sexuality. You're teaching cultural sexuality, and that needs to stop.
Right. You know what else in regards to this? Because you're right. They view this as there are so many bad parents. Mm-hmm. There are, but I would say this is all the more reason. Church, consider mentoring young men, young women in the community who don't have an active parent. If you have a way to be involved in that kid's life, you be a mentor, because this is not the government's role. This does not fall into the realm of what God has given to the government to do. We believe strongly God gives government certain rules and regulations that they are to bring about in the world, and there are others that are to be done in the home and in the community. And so I am thankful that there are a lot of communities where the teachers really are good mentors. But sometimes they're being forced to teach things that they wouldn't even agree with. So...
And then stigmatize sexually active youth.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing.
Nope.
That's a good thing. That, as long as that's what the kid wants, that's a good thing. No, it's not.
No.
It's not. That's called fornication. That's called immorality.
Making bad decisions.
Yep. That's not a Bible category, Jeremy. I'm just teasing. It is a Bible category. No later comprehensive sex education. Yeah, here. Materials provided or presented by outside organizations may not conflict with the provisions of this section. So same things as we said. It's also going to be applied to charter schools. And so do note that if you think, well, I'll send my kid to a private charter school, they'll be immune from this. No, they won't. This is the government is going to do everything in their power to make sure this hits every level of society. In fact, the only group that's probably safe for the moment is homeschoolers, but I think even eventually Illinois and much of Western government is going to come against homeschooling as well. So, all right, let's see. I think it's right about here.
It's right up there, isn't it?
Is it?
The reality of that there is a range of sexual... That's where
Yep. Thank you. The promotion of positive sexuality, the reality that there's a range of healthy sexual behaviors, and students should feel positive about sexual behaviors that are consensual, affirming, and pleasurable. That's the standard. I may have missed it earlier, but if I'm right, this is specifically... Yeah, this is grades 6 through 12. Mm-hmm. So this is what they will be teaching your kids if they are in that range. There's a range of healthy sexual behaviors, positive about sexual behaviors that are consensual, affirming, and pleasurable. So what's the cutoff for that?
There isn't anything. It's just whatever the culture deems inappropriate, which is dwindling by the day.
Yeah.
I say that because one of the shows my wife and I watch, New Amsterdam, has promoted brother and sister sex.
Mm-hmm.
On a recent episode, their resident psychologist, who is himself portraying a homosexual male who in a quote-unquote marriage relationship, is having a counseling session with a male and female who has found out that they are half brother and half sister. Through this interaction, through this session, the woman who is getting ready to be married to this man is having issues with the fact that they are brother and sister. And you can tell her heart is broken, but you can also tell that she doesn't like this. This isn't good. And then the person who is supposed to help her, the psychologist, is basically on board with the man who's like, who cares? We're brother and sister. We had a good thing going. We have sex. We're good. We're whatever. He's on board with the husband, and so eventually convinces the woman that this relationship isn't a bad thing, as long as nobody knows you're brother and sister. Mm. And as they're leaving, as he convinces them, as they're holding hands out of the scene, there is a woman who comes along, one of the character's helpers, one of a secretary of some sort, basically looks at the couple and says, "Oh, they're a cute couple, aren't they?" And he goes, "Sure is," but nobody knows that they're brother and sister. And so basically, he's allowed, or he's said, this show has said that no matter what kind of sexual relationship you have, whether it be a brother or sister, or whether it be male or female, or whether it be man and man, female and female, it's okay. As long as you're happy, as long as nobody knows your sexual perversion, it's okay. Go, live your life, get married with your brother and sister. Go ahead and do that. That's from a TV show that's relatively popular right now. Yeah. What's next is going to be bestiality. What's next is going to be sex with children. What's next is going to be breaking down the barriers of all the things that in the past we have looked on as perversions. We've looked on as mental health issues. We've looked on all these things, and so now the culture is like, we'll just take what the 1920s has said about sexuality and just put it on steroids and say, you know what, the 60s had it right. Let's just have sex with whoever we want. We're okay. Let's go.
Yeah.
That is what our culture deems healthy sexual behaviors. That's what our culture deems as feeling positive about sexual behaviors that are consensual. Both brother and sister were consensual by the end of the thing. They're affirming, we love each other, so it's okay, and pleasurable. Obviously, I don't have to say anything about that, but that's what our culture deems those things. Our culture deems that anything that feels good is right to you.
Yeah, and when you think about it, the reality is, this document would say, and who cares if people know you're your brother and sister, because we don't stigmatize. And so I would encourage you as a Christian, think critically about this. Take every thought captive, as we are called to do by the scriptures. Ask yourself, can a 13-year-old look at another 13-year-old or 10-year-old and have a consensual, affirming, and pleasurable relationship? And if you say yes, well, maybe you won't say yes, but most of the culture today would say, well, yeah, sure, as long as it's consensual, affirming, and pleasurable, 13, 13, 10, 10, whatever. Well, how about this? If they can do it at 10, can a 10-year-old affirm an 18-year-old? Can a 13-year-old affirm a 25-year-old? And why not? The reality is there is no why not. Yeah. They may say, well, there's laws right now. But they're not teaching the children that those laws have a foundation, so ultimately those are going to go away.
Yeah, and whatever the culture deems appropriate is what's going to eventually be taught.
Yeah. And so as Christians, we actually have a different standard. This is not a biblical standard, because here's the problem. God does not consent. God does not consent. And because parents are given as authorities over children, good dads do not consent to their 13-year-old having sex with anybody, let alone a 13-year-old or a 20-year-old. It doesn't matter if you think it's affirming. God determines what is good in his sight.
Yep.
And pleasurable, listen, God gives sex for pleasure. He gives it for procreation as well, but it is to be contained into the marriage bed. And marriage is something God gets to define, not us, not the world. And this is not a biblical standard. In fact, this is almost as antithetical to the biblical standard as can be, and that's what's going to be taught if this law passes. Might be a cause to call your senator, call your congressman, and at least report that you are in complete disagreement with this bill. There is a couple more things in here I want to go over, but that's the crux of it, I think, right there. So yeah, they do go into a section about consent is something that is freely given. Let me find that section if I can. And obviously there's a lot in this about abuse and information about how kids can about information that kids can get to help them if they are being abused. All of that's good, but get rid of all of this other stuff. So again, they go into consent, freely given agreement to sexual activity, to one particular sexual activity. They basically teach consent to kids, and like I said earlier, some of that sounds logical, reasonable, as long as we forget that the Bible determines that consent is not solely in the individual. It also rests with those who in authority that God has given, and it rests with God himself. And so, by all means, Christian young men, true, all of this is true. But more than this, God tells you that you are not to have marriage. You are not to have sex outside of marriage. And so follow what God has said in that regard as well. And then there is going to be information about Yeah, they do get into affirmative. I think right here, affirmative and inclusive examples of varying types of relationships and family structures. Discussion of healthy relationships, personal safety must include affirmative representation and health positive instruction on diverse sexual orientation, gender identities, and gender expression. That's what they want to teach your kids. That all of these things are, we are to be inclusive, we are to be affirmative of anything. Now think about this. We live in a society today where male and female was always understood as being positive. But now male and male, female and female are positive. Brother and sister are positive. Man and multiple wives, 2 men, 2 women, everything's positive. Everything's inclusive. Why not? And if you use the world standards, why not, Jeremy?
Yeah. Whatever makes you feel good, whatever makes you happy. Another show we watch, it's just going to be the point where we just stop watching media.
Yeah. If anything else, the media shows us, oh, so that's where our culture is at right now.
Yeah, and exactly. Like there will be times where the media will make fun of it and be like, this is the mirror. This is how ridiculously look. But then there are other times, like New Amsterdam, like the show Single Parents, who just had an episode regarding thruples. This one of the main characters is dating a woman. They find out his friends find out that eventually they find out that they're in a throuple, and at the end of everything, like at first they're like, well, this is ridiculous. Why are you doing this? Then at the end they basically say, you're doing it because you enjoy it, you like it, and we'll support you.
Yeah.
What?
And so you think.
And so our culture is teaching that, and so eventually the school is going to be teaching, as long as you're happy, as long as you feel good, that's what it is. They might put some of those words in there. That's not what they mean. What they mean is if it feels good to you, you can make a child do whatever you want. An adult can make a child do whatever they want, to the point of causing that person to be like, yeah, I'm good with it. I'm okay.
Yeah.
Come on.
5 years ago, Jeremy, you and I would have been talking about same-sex marriage and the reality that is on its way to a cliff, that our culture is just going to jump off if we don't put the brakes on somewhere. Mm-hmm. And God does put the brakes on homosexuality as a sin, so let's maybe put the brakes there. And the culture said, nope, we're not going to do that. And now, think about this, we're using words like incest, throuple, polyamory, and the reality is, Jeremy mentions pedophilia and bestiality. By no means is the culture there, except there are people who are coming out and saying, well, pedophilia is a sexual orientation. Because of the law and because it might be abusive, we're not going to allow it. But there are TED Talks affirming people who have feelings for children, sexual feelings for children. This isn't a joke. This is our culture. There is no slope. It's a cliff. They jumped. They are falling as fast as they can. That's where we are now. If we go down a little more, again, this is not going to be that surprising. Unbiased information and non-stigmatizing about options regarding pregnancy, including parenting, adoption, and abortion. We have to be non-stigmatizing. If you want an abortion, you get an abortion. Well, I would just ask, according to ancient cultures, before they learned that they could kill the child in the womb and nobody had to see the result of that, the child was born and left on a doorstep for the elements to kill, for the wolves to eat, for the cold to kill. Why not? Why not? In all honesty, should we stigmatize young women who consensually have sex and have a child and they leave it on the doorstep to die? And if not, why not? Now, there is information concerning the Abandoned Newborn Infant Protection Act. Great, except why? Why should a mom have to drive to a fire station or a hospital and drop their kid off? I mean, if they don't want the kid, why not just leave them on the doorstep to die? And every one of us says, whoa, that's not okay. Why not? Because God has said it's not okay, because it's the murder of the child. But guess what? This is allowed in our culture because we don't see it happen. Mm-hmm. And as long as we don't see it, we don't have to think about the effects of it. This is the culture we live in. Again, affirmative recognition of traditions, values, norms, gender roles. Same thing over and over again. There is a couple more things in here I would want to get to, though. They get into information about 5th graders as well. And I want to give you at least some insight into that. So this is 3rd through 5th grade. Think about what this means then. 3rd through 5th grade is still going to be taught information about diverse sexual orientations. Okay? This is our 8-year-olds now. Gender identities and gender expressions. By their own definition earlier, can't be stigmatizing. So this is all positive. This is our 8-year-olds. That's what they want. That's what the government. I know a whole lot of teachers, superintendents, principals who want none of this in their schools. They want to teach math and science and history. They want none of this in their schools. But this is what Illinois, and eventually it's going to be across the country, wants taught in schools today. If you keep going, there is the possible consequence of sharing or forwarding sexually explicit or sexually suggestive photographs or images, videos, or text messages. Not, don't do it. That's not what they're teaching, because that would be stigmatizing. But the possible consequences, well, if you do that, these are some of the things that can happen. But if you want to, we can't say no. We're not going to tell you it's wrong. That would be stigmatizing. The reason why they feel they need to teach this to 8-year-olds, to 10-year-olds, is because it's happening. So think about that. If your child goes into a public school with all of their friends having cell phones, with open access to every form of immorality on the internet, 8-year-olds, in fact, I think that's the average right now. For children viewing pornography for the first time is about 8 years old. Teach your children. Man, I would encourage you, teach your children not to look at their friend's phone if they have something they want to show them. Teach your children. I don't know how else to say that. They get into some information as well for K through 2nd grade, I guess is what it would be. Let me see. What's that? Number one? Okay. Yeah. 1st, 2nd, kindergarten if the school offers kindergarten. Comprehensive sex education shall include, and of course, varying family structures.
And gender roles.
And gender roles.
I don't understand that. That was the most confusing because
right?
you teach them this early that there are gender roles, but then eventually when they cross over to 3rd grade or whenever it's there are no gender roles because you can be whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so the roles are what?
Yeah, we believe in gender roles.
Yeah, male and female. Yeah, we've got gender roles, but when you put in all those other quote unquote genders, what are their roles?
Yeah, how many? You have as many roles as you have genders.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Consistency here. Just throw that out. Write B out because there are no such thing as gender roles now.
Yeah. And of course, varying family structure. Mom and mom, dad and dad, mom and 3 dads, whatever.
And when we were growing up, varying family structures wasn't that. It was you have grandma living with you.
Yep.
You have other family living with you. You don't have thruples. You don't have man and man. You don't have woman and woman. You don't have that. So and what's it going to be in 5 years from now? That you've got to define varying family rules or family structures.
Yeah. The reality is in 5 years what's going to change is this. And mind you, again, information about bullying, information about personal bodily autonomy, information about personal safety. We agree. I think there's wisdom in giving kids some small level of instruction in these things and the resources on how to deal with them. Fine. But that's not the only thing going on here. This is being snuck in with the rest of it. And if we keep going down, and it's not always as easy to find, There is information. Recognize that parents and guardians overwhelmingly support medically accurate, developmentally appropriate, cultural appropriate. But parents and guardians have the ultimate responsibility for imparting values. What if the parents stigmatize some of the things that you've said should not be stigmatized? Do the parents still have the main role then, the ultimate responsibility? I think they say yes for now, but they don't mean it. That's the thing. Yeah. They say it, but they don't mean it.
It is quite interesting that number 2 there, a parent, a guardian, or student has a right to excuse his or her child from all or part comprehensive sex education. Why don't we have that same right for the homosexual or the history?
Yeah,
the LGBTQ history. Why don't we have that same right? It's a similar situation where we don't want our children to hear these things, and a lot of the issue that I have right now with school districts are they don't send any information home with parents. And so this bill right now, unless we saw the news, we wouldn't know anything about it, and the school wouldn't send anything home about it. If they did, it would be a blurb. It would be a call saying, "Hey, we're going to start this tomorrow."
Yeah.
And I say that because our school district has allowed yoga in there, and yoga into our school. Now, there's a difference between yoga and the stretching part of yoga.
Yeah.
The stretching part of yoga should just be called stretching. Today, we're going to do some stretches.
Yeah.
Fine, no problem. The problem behind yoga is all of the Middle East or the Eastern issues, the teaching that they have behind it.
Yeah.
But I didn't find out that they were doing yoga until my son and daughter get in the car and say, "Hey, we did yoga today."
Yeah.
What? And so the issue is, number 2, that's all great and good, but are you going to tell me?
And like you said, I think so often, even in our school district, some of that information comes to us, but it's not. We would want that in big letters.
Yeah.
But often it's in there, but it's much smaller. We may not even think about, in the hustle and bustle of our lives. Sometimes we don't read everything in detail. I think that's an encouragement to us. I mean, get on your school's website. Get on your,
Well, and that's the thing is,
read as detailed as you can. Maybe sometimes we can.
And that's the thing. Number 3, is that all they're going to do is put it on their website? Like, what if I don't know to check it?
Yeah.
What if I don't check it the week that my... Why are you not sending things home? Why are you not telling me about this stuff? And so it's getting to the point where Christians, we may just have to take our kids out of the school district. I mean, obviously, Chris is in the process of doing that with all of his kids,
figuring all that out.
Yeah, and
because I love our school district in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
I do. But ultimately, they're going to be forced to teach us, and I think this is the key. In 5 years, what changes is they don't tell us anymore.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They don't give us a chance to excuse our kids. There's none of that. No. You're not even the one ultimately responsible to teach your kids these things. We are, because we know better.
Yeah, and just now thinking about it, like, the reality is it's going to be similar to the Reformation in that people left the Catholic Church because they were teaching things that they didn't agree with, and so they reformed. People came to the United States to get away from tyranny, to get away from these
often
things.
From reformers.
Yeah. And so we're in another time and place where these things are being enforced on godly children who have been given to God essentially, or who've been taken by Christ, and now we've got to get our kids out of this garbage because they're teaching things that ought not to be taught.
Yeah. And I think it'd be wonderful if the Reformation that we're talking about, the resistance to the tyranny that we see, is small school districts saying, no,
yeah,
we will not do this. And whether you want to take funding or not, maybe the community will find a way to still support us. Maybe we take all of the teachers out of that school and we close down that building, we close down that school, and we open up a Christian school in the district and just say we're done. We're not going to do that. And so I would encourage small communities, even like ours, think to ourselves, mind you, if this passes, if it just keeps coming year after year, more law after more law, forcing our school district to teach sexual immorality, maybe we stop and we say, you know what? How about we just close down the school and open up a new private school, do as much as we can that every student gets free tuition, and let's do that. Let's, as a community, whether Lutheran or Christian or Baptist or Pentecostal, let's agree our kids need something better than this. And again, this isn't an attack on many school districts in our state.
No.
They're being forced.
Yes.
The government is pushing this on them. And so maybe the Reformation is we call our senators and vote out these godless pagans in our community that think that this is a good bill. And don't be fooled by the snake oil. Because the snake oil in this is, it's only about protecting kids from abuse. No, it's not. We went through line by line. You can look this up. That's in there, but all the other things are slipped in as well. And so be discerning, Christians.
Yeah, there needs
be wise.
The government needs to stay out of schools. And
amen.
and I guess where I was trying to get with that is,
sorry.
No, you're fine. Is the reality is we have the wrong, not we. Our culture has the wrong idea of separation between church and state.
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson did not mean what everybody is saying he meant. He is basically, and it's actually not separation of church and state. It's separation of state and church. Yeah. That's what the words are. That the state have no part in the church and what the church does. The state should have no part in what the education system does, and that's a lot of the problem is the government's like, you know what, we can control control the school, so we can put our dogma, we can put our teaching in there and and cram it into our kids like this. We can't do it in the church, so we might as well do it here. And it's been that way. This isn't just a recent thing. It's been that way since the state had any issues with any involvement in the school. So separation of state and church and school, please.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I would be all for that. We this is the time we live in. We need to be wise. We need to be active too.
Yep.
Like I said, read every single piece of literature that your school sends you. Read. Go on their website. Look up everything, because there's going to be things that maybe the school informed you about and you missed. I don't either remember seeing something about yoga either, but it's possible that something was sent in. I do
probably
know,
on their website.
I do know that when they've done similar stuff in the past with
mindfulness.
And so I've always made sure to talk to those involved and been like, okay, but as long as you keep it from emptying ourselves and Eastern meditation type stuff, because those things are contrary to Scripture. So
and if we're
there's so much we could say.
Yep.
There is stuff in here about there's value in religious communities, there's value in your parents' traditions and values, but you always have to keep in mind that that's balanced against the fact that they already said anything stigmatizing these things is bad. So they can put that in also, but it doesn't mean anything when they've already said that it's bad to stigmatize some of these relationships. So, Christians, be biblical, be wise, take every thought captive.
Amen.
Amen. Go in peace.